Hello there, thrill seekers, and that was Mountain Song by Jane's Addiction. That was a song I don't know if I ever heard it before. I wasn't aware of it. It was one of the songs Jane's Addiction played when they played with Smashing Pumpkins, who I just saw them play at the Hollywood Bowl a couple of weeks ago, and it was really cool. And I was playing through the special Billy Corgan Big Muff. This is the one that supposedly is designed after the Big Muff that Billy Corgan played through, which happens to be the same Big Muff that I played through back when I was a little whippersnapper, because I'm about the same age as Billy Corgan, and we bought the same Big Muff at the same time, and now they've reissued it. So anyway, just a little guitar trivia for you. So I thought I would tell you some more stuff about Dogan and stuff that he said about life and death. And it's related to a question I received, and I'm going to read it to you. And it goes like this. Sorry if my eye line goes wonky, because I'm reading it off the same screen that I am using the laptop to. Anyway, my eye line's going to go wonky. Don't worry about the explanation. It comes from Craig Kingle, who has a picture of Kris Kringle on his thingy that comes up when I read his question, just to confuse me. And here is the question. So, does that feeling that your dad is still around, in quotation marks, after death, change how you feel about so much of what Zen says and what you've written yourself about how the self, in quotation marks, is nothing permanent and essential? I ask because it seems like you have a self, in quotes, that is somehow separate from your body and goes through the Bardo process or whatever. It goes against a lot of what Dogan says about thisness and the self only being what it normally is. But if there is a self that goes on after the body dies and after there is no longer anything concrete, a lot of scare quotes in this question, about there being... Are we back to talking about souls and essential personal identity and not really Zen anymore? I'm honestly asking if that's right, not criticizing you or saying, contradiction. I'm legitimately curious about how you integrate your feelings with all that, etc., etc., and that's the question. Okay, so by way of answering that question, I'm going to get really convoluted. Maybe the quickest and dirtiest way to answer the question is to say that, the Buddhist idea of non-self is tricky. Because, the Buddha said you don't have a soul. That the essential nature of us is not that we are an embodied soul and that we are permanently an individual self that travels from life to life as an individual self. But then you have this idea of rebirth and reincarnation. And my God, I could probably go on infinitely about this, and I would just end up tangling myself further and further in words. But maybe the shortest sort of version I can come up with to try to explain this is that the illusion of the individual self is not limited to the illusion of the embodied individual self, if you can get what I mean. That the illusion of the individual self carries on beyond the illusion of this body. So the illusion of the individual self was there before I was born as Brad Warner, and probably will persist after the Brad Warner incarnation is finished. But that doesn't mean it's permanent. That's the shortest version I can give you. And this is Buddhist philosophy. And I, even as a long-time Buddhist, take a lot of Buddhist philosophy with a grain of salt. But that's the shortest version, so that's the TLDR version of what I'm about to try to tell you. So here goes with the longer version. So let me try to give you the longer version. So here's some stuff, again, from Dogan's extensive record. So this is Dharma Hole Discourse number 311. The translators have given it the title Freedom in Life and Death. And it is Parinirvana Day Dharma Hall Discourse from the year 1249. You remember, Dogan died in the year 1253. And you can always figure out how old Dogan was when he wrote something because he was born in the year 1200. So he was 49 years old when he wrote this. The Mara of Death. So Mara is the best sort of analogy, and it's not a perfect analogy, is like demon, the devil of death. So if you want to get really more specific about it, you can go look it up, but let's just say the demon of death. The Mara of death saw Buddha passing away, and both Buddha and Mara laughed. Human and heavenly beings were disturbed and could not stop crying. Do not have doubts about this mountain monk, Dogan, neither laughing nor crying. All Buddhas in 10 directions also nod their heads. This crying is true for common people, but how is it for patched-robed monks? After a pause, Dogan said, thoroughly investigate life in order to study death. Letting go and taking hold of life and death depend on your refinement. And I read that to you because I really just like that one line. Thoroughly investigate life in order to study death. Now, here's another one that I like, and this is short. This is Dharma Hall Discourse number 265. It's not dated. The translators have titled this Just Come and Go. And it goes like this. Life has no place from where it comes. Just bear it and come, or arrive, again and again. Similarly, death has no place to where it goes. Just bear it and go again and again. Now, the next one I want to read you kind of expands on that, so let me read this one to you, and I'm going to admit I find this one a little confusing. But this is, yesterday I said that he gives 2 eulogies for nuns, that he gave for nuns in his, who were studying with him for their parents. And this is a eulogy for the nun Egi for her mother. And it says in the footnote, Bhikshuni, nun Egi, whose name means, it doesn't mean eggy like eggs and bacon and eggs, Egi, whose name means cherish the meaning, was a Dharma sister of Koan Ejo and disciple of Buchi Kakuan. That's all I guess we know about her. And this is a Dharma Hall discourse requested by Bhikshuni Egi for her late mother. Life has no place from whence it comes. So he's using that quote that he just used in the other Dharma Hall discourse. It's like putting on one's pants. I really wish I knew. This doesn't give you the original Japanese. Pants are, especially for medieval Japan, not common clothing. So I'm not sure what word they're using for pants here. The common Japanese word for pants is zubon. And I don't know how many Japanese people in these times were wearing zubon, especially women, but let's just read it. It's like putting on one's pants. However, our face is solemn. Therefore it is said, the 10,000 things return to the one. Death has no place to go. It is like taking off one's pants. However, our traces are dropped away. Therefore it is said, to where does the one return? At this very time, how is it? After a pause, Dogan said, from the beginning, life and death do not involve each other. Offense and happiness are both empty, with no place to abide. And that thing about the 10,000 things returning to the one and where does the one return to is a reference to an old koan that the footnote gives us, and it goes like this. A monk asked Zhao Zhao, also called Joshu, the 10,000 things return to the one, where does the one return to? Zhao Zhao, or Joshu, said, when I was in Qingzhou, I made a robe of 7 pounds. And that's the old koan. And it's usually explained as this is an unanswerable question, so you answer it by just talking about something concrete. You can't answer where does the one return to, and the 10,000 things return to the one, and it's, yeah. Let's not talk about it. I have to admit that I don't really get this Dharma Hall discourse, but I think it has something to do with everyday activity, putting on one's pants and taking off one's pants. It's not an erotic image. It's just like things you do every day. And our traces are dropped away. It's just this is what happens every day. Now, As to this matter of the soul, I was looking things up and came across a specific koan that talks about the soul. So I wanted to read you that. And it is koan number 35 in the Mumonkan, which is the Gateless Gate. And it goes like this. Now I'm going to read you first this English translation, and then I want to talk about it. Goso said to his monks, Seijo's soul separated from her being. Which was the real Seijo? Now that translation is probably about as good as you're going to get given the problems with translating Chinese into English. But when I looked at the actual Chinese, Seijo's soul separated from her being. Because of the way English is, you have to say Seijo's soul separated from something, but it really just kind of says Seijo's soul departed. But it's a reference to an old story, and I want to tell you about the old story. So, let me tell you about the old story. The story of Seijo's two souls comes from a Chinese book of ghost stories. When she was a baby, Seijo was betrothed to her cousin Ochu. However, when she grew up, her father wanted to give her in marriage to another young man. Ochu left home in indignation and went up the Yangtze River by boat. At midnight, someone came running along the bank, eagerly calling Ochu's name. It was Seijo. They journeyed together to a distant place where they lived and had 2 children. Okay, it was her cousin, but, okay. 5 years went by, and they became homesick. You don't know. When they say cousin in these old stories, sometimes the word cousin is used very loosely, so it probably wasn't exactly her father's sister's son or something like that. It might have been something much more distant than that. Let's see. 5 years went by, and they became homesick. They yearned to see their parents again. So they decided to visit their birthplace. Coming down the river, Ochu left Seijo in the boat and went alone to her father to make an apology for their running away. But to his astonishment, he was told that Seijo had been in bed unconscious ever since he left home. There were found to be 2 Seijos, one in the boat and the other sick in bed. But when the one in the boat came into the house, the other one got out of bed. Whereupon the 2 met and melted together into one Seijo. And the question, which was the real Seijo? First, discover your own real self, then you can see which is the real Seijo. Buddhism asserts that there is no man, no person, no individual person, but causation alone, no constant ego, and no entity called the soul. Everything mutates in the stream of cause and effect. What has appeared is vividly there. When it is gone, it is gone. Moment after moment, it streams along. Beyond this appearing and going, there is essentially nothing else. Phenomena themselves are real. When you ask what is real, you have already missed it. The real is realized in your samadhi. And the commentary is kind of interesting, and here's the commentary. This is Mumon's comment. Mumon is the guy who compiled these koans. When you realize what the real is, you will see that we pass from one husk to another like travelers stopping for a night's lodging. But if you do not realize it yet, I earnestly advise you not to rush about wildly. When earth, water, fire, and air suddenly separate, you will be like a crab struggling in boiling water with its 7 or 8 arms and legs. When that happens, don't say I didn't warn you. Now, that's interesting because when he says we pass from one husk to another like travelers stopping for a night's lodging, that can kind of sound like the old sort of Hindu idea that we have a soul and our body is just a husk and we travel from one husk to another. But here's what I guess the compiler of this, Katsuki Sekida? I don't know who wrote this, but here's what somebody says. We pass from one husk to another. This line can easily be misleading. Husk here means nothing solid, but only a temporary state of mind. I earnestly advise you not to rush about wildly. This person says, quietly and earnestly practice zazen, and then everything will become clear. So this is kind of interesting. Oh, there you are. Hi, Ziggy. Anyway, this is kind of interesting. So this idea of the soul is something that Buddhism rejected a long time ago, and it's one of the hallmarks of Buddhism that differentiates Buddhism from Brahmanism, aka Hinduism. In Hinduism, you have this idea of the Atman, the soul, which is your true nature, is this immortal soul that lives in your body and departs your body when you die, and Buddha rejected that. Now, I should say as a caveat that in more kind of, let's use the dirty word, advanced versions of Hinduism, more sort of advanced implies better, and I'm sorry, but this sort of more later. How about we say it like that? I don't know. I don't want to offend anybody. But in certain versions of Hinduism, the word Atman has turned into a word that means something other than the indivisible soul. But in the versions of Hinduism that existed in Buddha's time, I think it's probably fair to say that it usually referred to an immortal soul, something more like the Christian idea of the immortal soul. So Buddha rejected that idea. However, he didn't necessarily reject the idea that there is a kind of continuity from lifetime to lifetime. And this is where it gets really, really sticky. And maybe every time I talk about this, I kind of see why my teacher, Gudo Wafu Nishijima, my ordaining teacher, hated to talk about this stuff. Because whenever the subject of rebirth and reincarnation came up, he would just flat out deny it. He would just say, there's no such thing as rebirth and reincarnation. When you die, you're dead. Forget about reincarnation and rebirth. That's just a Brahmanist idea that was hooked onto Buddhism. He would just really, really just, punch it down. He didn't like to talk about it at all. However, I had another teacher, which was Tim McCarthy, and Tim McCarthy would tend to take the more standard view that you find probably much more commonly among Zen teachers, which is a slightly more agnostic view. Like, you could poll all Zen teachers and find a plethora of views about this, but I think what you would mostly find as a kind of consensus is that they mainly in the Zen sect kind of hold a view of rebirth and reincarnation as a reality, but they hold it quite lightly. Whereas in Tibetan Buddhism, they are, and again, I'm talking in generalizations, and I hope I'm not offending anybody, but in Tibetan Buddhism, the general tendency is to be kind of like reincarnation, yeah, the Tibetan Book of the Dead said it, I believe it, that settles it. They have a very detailed picture of reincarnation and what happens and how you move from life to life and what the bardos are and such like and everything. And then they have this whole system where they select the new Dalai Lama by following the rebirth of the old Dalai Lama and trying to find out where he reincarnated next, and they really, really kind of strictly believe in it. Whereas in Zen Buddhism, the belief in rebirth and reincarnation kind of hangs out in the background as a thing that, yeah, we kind of believe in that, but we don't want to go too much into detail about it because any claim to knowledge about that you end up in the area of speculation. This is why I say it always gets sticky, because if I were to say anything about it, it just ends up being like, blah, it's like trying to describe a foreign country that you've seen a couple of postcards of, and then you're going to pretend that you've been there. That's kind of what it feels like. And so it kind of feels silly to try to get any more detailed than just the really basic stuff. So I know there's an Eiffel Tower there, but, well, I've been to France, so, I can't do that one. But anyway, I don't know. Angola? I've never been to Angola. I don't know what's in Angola. Yeah. I assume there's like a mountain in Angola. But if I tried to tell you all about Angola, I would sound like an idiot. Maybe it's like that, you know? So anyway, there. I've just confused you a lot for almost 20 minutes, and I hope you enjoyed that. And maybe you enjoyed the song and seeing Ziggy hang around behind me and liked the quotes that I gave you. If you want to contribute to me doing more confusing videos like this, you can go to the URL that you're seeing on the screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. There you will find links to my PayPal and Patreon accounts. Those are my main and usually only ways of making a living, and I really appreciate your support. But as always, this is offered for free, so you don't gotta donate if you don't want to donate. We will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bye. You were the star of today's video, weren't you? You were all over today's video, huh? Do you like being a big star? Alright, let's go inside and edit the video, okay? Alright, let's do that.